Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Final Fantasy Bestiary. This series is dedicated towards discovering the history and lore behind Final Fantasy's most iconic creatures and characters. In this episode, we won't take a look at any one individual. Instead, we'll cover a type of enemy that fans of the Final Fantasy series know all too well: Superbosses. Now, there's a lot of Superbosses to get through, so this will be a two-part video. This first video, we're going to cover up to and through Final Fantasy VI. For those unfamiliar with the term, a superboss is an optional boss that boasts incredible strength, trumping the final bosses of many titles. It's common in other RPGs too, but Final Fantasy is definitely the one that stuck with me over the years. Often, these bosses have several extremely punishing attacks and are designed for very high-level parties. They are also so overwhelming that often the best methods to beating them involve very tight strategies that can be punished with a single delayed or misplaced action. For the efforts of the player, it's also common for these super bosses to drop rare and powerful items, though these items serve little purpose as you often have nothing left to challenge with these new toys, outside of potentially another super boss. Ultimately, a player should only take them on if looking for a challenge or if they are a completionist, which, let's be honest, most Final Fantasy players are looking for both of these things. Some super bosses we've actually covered in a lot of previous bestiaries: Ultima Weapon, Omega, Omega Weapon, Shinryu, and these enemies, they just recur in a lot of Final Fantasy titles. If you're interested in knowing more about those specific super bosses, be sure to check the Bestiary playlist in the top right corner of the video. We'll try to keep segments on those ones in particular kinda short in this video. Final Fantasy I's original release contained no actual super bosses, but it did have the War Mech, a super rare encounter on the final bridge before Tiamat. This enemy was more powerful than the four fiends, one of which is Tiamat, the boss you're on your way to. And these are the primary antagonists of the game, alongside Garland and Chaos. Capable of destroying parties nearly instantly, most players pray they never encounter it on that final stretch of the dungeon. You have a 3 in 64 chance of encountering it, and those are odds that are really not that unlikely. It's very often that you get destroyed by it after a long dungeon. It is unfortunately nerfed in the Dawn of Souls version of the game. However, this version of the game incorporated 4 optional dungeons in the form of the Earthgift Shrine, Hellfire Chasm, Lifespring Grotto, and the Whisperwind Cove. These dungeons contained bosses from Final Fantasies 3, 4, 5, and 6. Shinryu, Omega, and Deathgaze are considered to be the scariest bosses amongst these dungeons, so you just have to be careful with those ones. And even then, there's not too much crazy strategy that goes into most of these bosses. In the 20th anniversary edition of the game, and all versions after, a new dungeon was added called the Labyrinth of Time. This dungeon could be completed multiple ways, each with the same super boss, Chronodea, at the end. Though depending on which paths you took to get to her, you may fight a stronger or weaker version of her. Final Fantasy II also started with enemies similar to War Mech, including the Iron Giant, who could wipe the floor with unprepared parties in Pandemonium. That's a tongue twister. Though there were also some bosses that guarded chests, rarely are they ever seen as true super bosses. In the remakes, Ultimate Weapon appears along with 2 other new super bosses, Frakios and Dumian. Frakios can be fought over and over again to obtain each character's ultimate weapon, though if the player challenges Dumian and wins, Frakios is no longer able to be challenged. While Frakios is dangerous for his strong magic and devastating physical attacks, Dumian uses the Starfall attack from the final boss of the game, which hurts a lot. There is also the Soul of Rebirth optional quest in the remakes, which ends with the Light Emperor boss at the end. The original Final Fantasy III had no enemies that were considered super bosses until the 3DS remake, which introduced the Iron Giant in the new dungeon. I always loved the originality with that name. He attacks 4 times per turn, with each attack potentially inflicting status effects. He can also cast Meteor, and later in the fight, replaces Meteor with Swipe to hit the party for massive damage. He is also a super boss that literally only gives you a "congratulations, you beat me" item, so don't expect any great items from him. Final Fantasy IV is another game that had no super bosses in the original. It's pretty crazy to think that super bosses are actually a more recent thing in the series, but we remember a lot of the super bosses from going back and playing the remakes anyway. However, the remakes in this game did have plenty of super bosses to go around. The lunar ruins contain the lunar versions of Rydia's summons, though the true end goal is Zeromus EG, the final boss of the ruins. He shares a sprite with the game's final boss, Zeromus, and is actually designed to be reminiscent of the Zeromus fought in, and I quote this, Final Fantasy IV Easy Mode, unquote, a version only released in Japan that was easier to understand for young gamers. EG is meant to be a pun on the term easy game, though this Zeromus is hardly easy. He also basically just does that congratulatory thing that happened with the Iron Giant in Final Fantasy III, and then says get the hell out and shows him the exit of the dungeon. This is a lot different from the other super boss in the Lunar Ruins, Brachiorados, which drops the best shield in the game, the Hero Shield. It can also be fought multiple times to get the shield for everyone who can use it. But wait, there's more! In the 3D version of the game, Garyun and Protobabble are super bosses in place of the Lunar Ruins, which only exist in the PSP and GBA versions. Protobabble can only be accessed if you stole a dark matter from Zeromus on your first playthrough and are now using it on the surface of the moon in New Game Plus. As the prototype of the Giant of Babel, he is an extremely difficult super boss that can wipe out even the most prepared parties with his divine judgment. The other super boss, Garyun, is capable of utilizing all of the Archfiend's strongest attacks, some capable of one-shotting party members. With the right setup, he falls fairly easily, but just because he has half of Protobabble's health does not mean you can take him lightly. Additionally, in the sequel, The After Years, Shinryu, Ultima Weapon, and Omega all appear as super bosses, as well as some of the lunar eidolons from the original Final Fantasy IV on PSP. I shouldn't say original there, the Final Fantasy IV that was on the PSP. In the complete edition, Lost Babel is also added, which must be fought by 3 different parties to take out his 3 different parts. Final Fantasy V is a simple one, simply containing the super bosses Omega and Shinryu. In the remake, you can challenge Omega Mark II and Neo Shinryu in the Seal Temple, which are pretty identical to their original versions. The ultimate super boss is Enuo, a once immortal wizard who traded his immortality for control of the Void 1,000 years ago. You can find him at the bottom of the Seal Temple, though his strength pales in comparison to many other Final Fantasy super bosses, and is defeated with fairly simple strategies as long as the players are able to reach him. And for the last game in this video, we have Final Fantasy VI, which was also fairly light on super bosses. While it had plenty of optional bosses that could pose some threat, including the 8 legendary dragons, the only one in the original version that was considered a super boss was Death Gaze, though you were able to really diminish his health slowly over time, since you just encountered him over and over and over again. The fact that it wasn't one really hard boss fight all at once really diminishes his presence as a super boss. However, there was a super boss who was removed from the original game that was reincorporated into the later remakes, the Kaiser Dragon. After defeating the 8 legendary dragons, one could travel to the Dragon's Den to challenge him in an attempt to obtain the Diabolos Magicite. Packing 5 lives and random attack patterns with each resurrection, Kaiser poses a serious threat to unprepared parties. That being said, defeating him simply unlocks the one true super boss of Final Fantasy VI. I shouldn't say one true, Kaiser's pretty hard. The true super boss, the end one, Omega Weapon, a reskin of the Atma boss from the Floating Continent. He has 3 lives and is about as threatening as the Kaiser Dragon, though with the Diabolos Magicite and his level up bonuses, if you take some time in between the boss fights, you can prepare even better for him. And that's going to be it for this episode of Final Fantasy Bestiary. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and let me know what bestiaries you want to see in the future. The next one is going to be the part 2 of the super bosses. I know a lot of people are like, how could you stop on Final Fantasy VII? Well, that's because I'm going to have to do a lot of talking in the next video, so probably should save that one for the next video. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one, and until then, take care.